I knew something was off the moment I saw my front gate unlatched. My name's Yates Willer, and I've lived in this quiet, cookie-cutter suburb of Hillridge Pines for 5 years. Honestly, I liked it here: decent neighbors, quiet nights, and a backyard big enough for my golden retriever, Moxie, to tear around like a lunatic. But that all started going downhill when Ophelia Darnell became president of the HOA 6 months ago. Ophelia is one of those women who rocks a permanent scowl and treats every neighborhood sidewalk like it's her personal runway. She's in her late 50s, platinum blonde bob, and always wearing some god-awful blazer like she's running for mayor. Which, honestly, wouldn't surprise me. She's the type who carries a clipboard like it's a scepter and acts like the HOA charter is carved on stone tablets. Anyway, I came home from a short grocery run around noon last Friday and noticed the gate swinging slightly. I always make sure it's latched, mostly because Moxie's a little too friendly with squirrels and has no problem making introductions through traffic. I dashed into the backyard and nothing, no Moxie, just her red ball sitting in the grass like a crime scene. "Moxie," I called. "Girl, where are you?" Nothing, not a bark, not a rustle. I walked the perimeter, checked the side yard, even peeked under the deck. My chest tightened. I could feel the panic start to rise. She never runs off. Ever. I checked the street for any signs of her. That's when I noticed Ophelia standing across the road, arms crossed, watching me, not helping, just watching. "Ophelia," I jogged over to her driveway. "You see, Moxie, my dog's missing." She pursed her lips like she'd just sucked a lemon. "Yes. Because irresponsible owners leave their gates open. It wasn't open when I left, and she's never run off." Well, maybe she decided she was tired of the barking. The HOAs had several noise complaints about her, you know. My jaw twitched. From who? Ophelia didn't answer. She just raised her eyebrows and turned toward her front door. "She's chipped," I said, stepping forward. "If someone picked her up, I'll find her." Ophelia looked back over her shoulder. "Then by all means, go find her. But if she was causing a disturbance, don't expect sympathy." That's when I noticed something strange. Her basement window partially open and a faint bark. I froze. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" I stepped closer, real slow. The bark came again, clearer this time, definitely Moxie. "That's my dog," I said, pointing at the window. "She's in your basement," Ophelia scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Why would your mutt be in my home?" I didn't even respond. I marched right past her, down the side of her house toward the basement door. Locked. I knocked hard. "Moxie." "You in there, girl?" A flurry of barks exploded from behind the door. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You locked my dog in your basement," I said, turning back toward her. My voice was shaking now, not from fear, but from pure, white-hot fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" She was wandering, Ophelia snapped, walking toward me. "Off leash. That's a violation. I was doing my duty." "Your duty," I shouted. "You broke into my backyard and kidnapped my dog." "I secured her for the safety of the neighborhood," she said, like she was reading from a script, "and I fully intend to fine you." That's when I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You're admitting to trespassing and unlawfully detaining my dog," she blinked for the first time. I didn't trespass. The gate was open." "No, it wasn't. I have cameras." Her face went pale. I didn't bother arguing anymore. I was done playing nice. I called the police right in front of her, walked back to my house and pulled the footage from the backyard camera. Sure enough, 20 minutes after I left, there she was, Ophelia Darnell, in a floral blazer and heels, reaching over my gate, unlatching it, and coaxing Moxie out with a treat. Then she looped a leash around her neck and walked her across the street like she'd just adopted her. I emailed that video to myself and had it ready by the time the cruiser rolled into the neighborhood. The officer stepped out. Young guy, probably just out of academy, looked at me, then at Ophelia, who was standing in her front yard pretending to water dead azaleas. "You're the one who called about the dog?" he asked. I nodded and handed him my phone. "She broke into my backyard and locked my dog in her basement." He watched the video, then looked at Moxie, who was now whining behind the basement door. "Is that door locked?" he asked. Yeah, she won't open it. He walked over to Ophelia. Ma'am, is there a reason this man's dog is locked in your basement? She huffed. Because he left her unattended. She was barking, and did you have permission to enter his property? I had cause. The HOA has jurisdiction. No, ma'am. The officer cut her off. The HOA does not overrule property laws. You can't just enter someone's yard and remove their pet. She was a nuisance. She was in her own backyard. Ophelia's voice raised a notch. I was protecting the neighborhood. By committing theft, that shut her up. The officer turned to me. Do you want to press charges? I didn't even blink. Absolutely. They brought in another cruiser and had her in cuffs within 20 minutes. She screamed about bylaws the whole time, said they'd regret this, that she'd have my house fined into foreclosure, but the best part. Moxie came bounding out of the house the moment the other officer popped the basement door, tail wagging like mad, tongue out, straight into my arms. I scooped her up and held her tight. Ophelia was still yelling as they loaded her into the cruiser. You're going to regret this, Mr. Willer. I am the HOA, you'll see, I just smiled. Not anymore, you're not, and I meant it. Because that was just the beginning. By Monday morning, half the neighborhood knew what happened. The other half was about to. I woke up to a knock at my door around 7:30. Moxie was curled up beside the couch. I'd let her sleep in the living room with me the last 2 nights, just in case she was still shaken up. She didn't seem to be, though. If anything, she was back to her usual self, tail thumping against the carpet the second she heard the knock. When I opened the door, I found Mr. Rudd from 3 houses down standing there with a travel mug and a look that said he hadn't slept. You're Yates, right? He asked. That's me. You got a minute? I stepped out onto the porch, leaving the door open behind me so Moxie could peek out. I heard about what happened with Ophelia, he said, voice low. I just want to say, good, about time someone stood up to her. I nodded. He hesitated, glancing up and down the street like he was making sure no one else was listening. She pulled something similar with my daughter's dog last year. Didn't go as far as locking her up, but she sprayed the poor thing with a hose and claimed she was training it not to bark. Did you report it? He shook his head. My wife didn't want to stir things up. Said we'd just end up on her radar, but now that this came out. He took a long sip from his mug. We're with you, a lot of us are. I hadn't expected that. I figured some people would be glad she got knocked off her pedestal, but this was the first sign that there might actually be momentum building to get rid of her for good. Appreciate it, I said. Honestly, I think we've only scratched the surface. His eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? I told him, about what I found that morning when I checked my mailbox, a folded piece of paper, no envelope. It was a copy of a violation notice, unsigned, dated a week prior. The listed offense? Improper lawn edge maintenance. I hadn't received one before, not until now. Rudd scoffed. She's retaliating. That's exactly what I thought, but then I noticed something else. I pulled the paper from my jacket pocket and pointed to the bottom left corner. See that? Code 72B, that's not even in the current bylaws. He looked closer. You're right. I used to serve on the board back before Ophelia took over. We revised the codes 3 years ago and got rid of all the 70s, they were outdated. So she's issuing violations using obsolete codes. That's not just shady, that's illegal. I nodded. And I think she's been doing it for a while. He tapped the paper against his palm. You need to show this at the next meeting. I plan to, but I'm also going a step further. That afternoon, I took a drive down to the county records office. They weren't exactly thrilled to see me show up with a list of requests, but once I explained the situation without mentioning names, they directed me to their digital archives. I spent 3 hours combing through property records, HOA filings, and court dockets. What I found made my stomach tighten. Ophelia had filed at least 7 liens against properties in the last 2 years. That wasn't the shocking part. Liens happen when people don't pay their dues or rack up fines. But 3 of those liens were tied to violations that didn't exist in the official HOA charter. And 2 of the properties had changed hands shortly afterward. I copied everything. Dates, case numbers, Copies of the original liens, all of it. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, my cousin, Randy. She's a real estate attorney in Charlotte and helped me close on my house when I first moved in. Randy, I said once we got past the pleasantries. How illegal is it to forge HOA violations in order to push liens through? She didn't hesitate. It's fraud. If she knew the codes were invalid and still used them to enforce penalties, that's textbook fraud, possibly racketeering if there's a pattern, especially if people lost property as a result. I told her about the liens. She whistled. If you've got documentation, I'd talk to the DA. That night, I sat down and organized everything: the footage of her taking Moxie, the fake violation notice, screenshots of the archived bylaws, and copies of the suspicious liens. I put it all on a flash drive and made 3 backups. Tuesday morning, I drove down to the county courthouse and walked into the office of Assistant District Attorney Marla Vega. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. I didn't know her well, but she had a reputation for being meticulous and not putting up with nonsense. I heard about the incident with the dog, she said after I introduced myself. You're pressing charges? Already filed, yes, but that's not why I'm here. I handed her the flash drive. She slid it into her laptop and started opening files. The more she clicked, the more her expression changed mild interest to focused attention, then to something colder. These liens, she said. You say 2 of these homes changed hands after the violations were issued? Within 3 months, she leaned back in her chair. Do you know if the owners sold voluntarily? I don't, but I can try to find out. Do that, and don't talk to anyone about this yet. If what you're showing me is accurate, this could turn into a criminal case. When I got home, there was a new envelope taped to my front door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single page listing a fine of over $1,200 for unauthorized modifications to exterior structure. I hadn't modified anything. I took the paper straight to my scanner and added it to the growing file of evidence. By Friday, I had spoken to one of the former homeowners listed on the lien. He was a retired firefighter named Doug, now living 20 miles away. When I told him why I was calling, he didn't hesitate. She forced me out, he said. Claimed my fence was 3 inches too high and hit me with so many fines I couldn't keep up. My wife was sick at the time. I didn't have the bandwidth to fight. We sold and moved. I gave his statement to the ADA. That weekend, the neighborhood buzzed with whispers. Ophelia hadn't returned home since her arrest. Her son, a tight-lipped man in his 30s with the same cold stare, came by to collect her mail and water her plants. He ignored everyone. Monday morning, I got a call. This is Ada Vega. I've opened a formal investigation into the Hillridge Pines HOA and its current president. I'll be issuing subpoenas for financial records and board meeting minutes. I'd appreciate it if you kept this quiet for now. I will. We may also need you to testify. You'll have my full cooperation. After I hung up, I walked out to my porch. The air felt lighter somehow. Moxie trotted out beside me, nose twitching at the breeze. Across the street, mister. Rudd was trimming his hedges. He gave me a subtle nod. Something was shifting. The fear that hung over this neighborhood like a heavy coat was starting to lift. People were watching, listening, waiting, and I wasn't done yet. By Wednesday, the neighborhood's mood had shifted from cautious curiosity to quiet rebellion. It started when someone hung a plain white poster on the community bulletin board near the clubhouse. In black marker, it read, HOA meeting, Thursday, 6 p.m. Attendance matters. No logo, no signature. Just a time and a warning. It was the first notice not hand-delivered by Ophelia or one of her clipboard cronies in years. I didn't put it up, but I had a pretty good idea who did. Turns out, once people realized she wasn't coming back anytime soon, they weren't shy about stepping in. That afternoon, a man I'd never met rang my doorbell. He wore a faded denim jacket, wire-rimmed glasses, and had the kind of handshake that felt like gripping sandpaper. Name's Ellis, he said. Used to be treasurer on the HOA board before Ophelia decided experience was a liability. Heard you stirred up a hornet's nest. You could say that. I've got the old board meeting records, the ones she told everyone were lost in the cloud, thought you might want to look. He held out a USB stick. I took it, eyebrows raised. You kept backups? She tried to change the voting bylaws 2 years ago to let the board appoint replacements without a vote. That didn't sit right with me. Figured someday someone would need proof. I plugged the drive into my laptop right after he left and spent the next few hours combing through the files. Meeting minutes, financial reports, internal memos, some of it handwritten and scanned, most of it typed in her stiff, formal tone. That's when I found it, a folder labeled Compliance Disputes. Inside were audio files, dozens of them. Recordings of board meetings that, according to the public records, never happened. I clicked one dated from last fall, a man's voice tense, tired. She's got 3 kids, Ophelia. They can't afford the fines. You're bleeding them. Then Ophelia, clipped and cold. If they wanted sympathy, they shouldn't have replaced their garage door with something that looks like it belongs on a barn. We have standards. Another voice. That's not a violation. It was approved by the prior board. Ophelia again. Which is why I had the prior approvals voided, retroactively. I sat back in my chair. This wasn't just overreach. This was manipulation at a level that bordered on predatory. I forwarded the folder to Ada Vega with a short note. You'll want to hear this. The next morning she called. This is worse than I thought, she said. Can you come in today? I drove down to her office again. This time with Ellis's USB stick in my jacket pocket and a folder of printed transcripts from the audio files. In the conference room, Vega had 2 other people with her. A stern-faced woman in a charcoal blazer who introduced herself as Detective Lorna Reeves, and a man in a gray suit with a county seal lapel pin. He said he was from the Office of Public Integrity. I need you to walk us through how you obtained these files, Vega said. I did step by step. No embellishments, no editorializing. When I finished, Reeves leaned forward. You said she locked your dog in her basement. Did she say anything about why? I nodded. Claimed it was a noise complaint. But she never filed one, at least not officially. Did she threaten to fine you? She did. Verbally and in writing. And after the arrest, I got 2 more violations that were completely fabricated. Reeves looked at Vega. That's consistent with what we're seeing. We've reviewed 7 years of complaints. Most of them were never formally voted on by the board. They were issued directly from her office. Vega opened a folder and slid a sheet across the table. We found evidence she altered the minutes of at least 4 meetings to hide rejected motions. Then enforced those motions anyway. I scanned the document. It was a side-by-side comparison of original handwritten minutes and the typed versions submitted to the county. Entire sections had been changed. One line in particular stood out. Motion to increase maximum fine limit from $500 to $2,000 rejected unanimously. In the typed version, that same line read, motion to increase maximum fine limit approved, vote 4-1. She forged votes, repeatedly, Vega said. And we're just getting started. We pulled her financial records. She's been diverting late fee payments into a private account under a shell company registered in her nephew's name. I exhaled slowly. How much? Over $72,000. And that's just what we've verified so far. Why hasn't she been formally charged yet? We're building a case, Reeves said. We want it airtight. What about the people she forced out, the ones who lost their homes? Vega nodded. We've contacted them. If we can establish a pattern of malicious enforcement tied to financial gain, we can charge her under state racketeering laws. RICO. Reeves gave a tiny nod. That's the idea. When I got home that afternoon, I noticed something unusual. Several houses had small red ribbons tied to their mailboxes. At first, I thought it was some kind of holiday thing I'd missed, but when I saw the same ribbon on Mr. Rudd's fence post, I walked over. Red for resistance, he said before I even asked. My daughter came up with it. Thought we needed a way to show we're done letting one person control how we live. I looked up and down the street. At least a dozen houses had them now. You think people will show up to the meeting? Oh, they'll come. Folks are angry. And they're tired of being afraid. That night, I got a message from Ellis. He'd been contacted by 2 former board members who'd been ousted by Ophelia under questionable circumstances. One of them, a woman named Dana, had a printed copy of the original HOA charter, the one that had been in place before Ophelia started rewriting it piecemeal. We met in the community park just after dusk. Dana was short, sharp-eyed, and carried a 3-inch binder like it was a weapon. She changed the voting thresholds, she said, flipping to a highlighted page. Used to be a 2/3 majority required for any amendments. She dropped it to 51% and started passing things with 2 or 3 votes. Did she document the amendment process? Dana snorted. No. She claimed it was a clerical correction, but there was never a vote. I was secretary at the time. I took pictures of the pages and added them to the growing evidence file. The next day, Thursday, the clubhouse parking lot was full an hour before the meeting was set to begin. By 6 o'clock, it was standing room only. People who hadn't attended a meeting in years were there, whispering in small groups, eyes darting toward the front table where the remaining board members sat looking like they wished they were anywhere else. I stood in the back with Ellis and Dana. One of the board members, a man named Caleb who'd kept his head down through most of Ophelia's reign, cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. Thank you all for coming. We know there's been a lot of confusion and concern about recent events. As acting president, Dana stepped forward, binder in hand. There's no acting president, she called out. Caleb blinked. Excuse me. There's no acting president, she repeated. The bylaws state that in the event of a president's removal or incapacitation, a vote of homeowners is required to appoint a replacement. You've held no such vote. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Ellis raised his voice next. And the charter states that any homeowner may call for a removal vote if backed by 30% of residents. I've got 78 signatures. That's more than enough. Caleb looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. Dana held up a printed motion. We move for a full audit of the HOA's financial records, a reversion to the original charter, and a vote to dissolve the current board. People clapped. Others stood. A few shouted support, and just like that, the tide broke. By the end of the night, 2/3 of the board had resigned. A special election was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, a temporary committee of 5 homeowners, including me, Dana, and Ellis, was appointed to oversee operations. The next morning, Ada Vega called again. We're issuing an arrest warrant, she said. We've reviewed everything. The fraud alone would be enough, but with the financials, the forged documents, and the recordings, it's a slam dunk. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. But I did walk Moxie a little longer that morning, past houses with ribbons fluttering quietly in the breeze, past neighbors who waved instead of looking away, past the clubhouse where, for the first time in years, the doors weren't locked. Hillridge Pines was waking up. And the woman who tried to control it with fear and lies, she was about to answer for every single one. The day Ophelia Darnell was brought back to Hillridge Pines in handcuffs was the first time our neighborhood ever saw a news van. It came barreling up the main road just after noon, white with a satellite dish on top, blue graphics on the side, and a reporter in a navy dress stepping out before the engine was even off. She looked around like she half expected protesters or a crime scene. Instead, she got a quiet cul-de-sac of manicured lawns and retirees standing by their mailboxes like it was a parade. The squad car pulled up a few minutes later. Ophelia was in the back, stiff-backed and stone-faced, wearing a beige trench coat like she was headed to a board meeting instead of a booking. The moment the car stopped, the reporter swooped in. Mrs. Darnell, can you comment on the charges? Ophelia didn't even look at her. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, refusing to acknowledge the camera 2 feet from her window. As they led her into the courthouse annex attached to the neighborhood civic center, the reporter turned and caught sight of me standing by the flagpole with Moxie at my side. "You're Mr. Willer, correct?" "I am." "You were the one who reported her," I nodded, keeping my voice even. "That's right. Can you confirm whether she's being charged with financial crimes in addition to the incident with your dog?" "I can't speak to that." I gave a short pause before adding, "But I trust the evidence will speak for itself." She tried to ask more, but I walked away before she could get the microphone up again. I wasn't about to give her a soundbite they could twist into something dramatic. Inside, the hearing room was already filling with residents. Not just the loud ones or the usual complainers this time, it was families with kids, retirees in pressed button-ups, even the usually elusive couple from the corner house with the koi pond. Everyone was there, and they weren't whispering anymore. The judge presiding over the arraignment was a no-nonsense woman named Judge Howell. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Mrs. Darnell, you are being charged with 1 count of animal theft, 2 counts of trespassing, 3 counts of document falsification, 5 counts of financial fraud, and 1 count of racketeering involving misuse of homeowners association funds. Additional charges may follow pending ongoing investigation." Ophelia stood with her attorney, an older man in a tan suit who looked like he hadn't expected things to spiral this far. She kept her eyes forward, still refusing to look at anyone. Judge Howell continued. "Due to the nature of the financial crimes and the evidence suggesting systematic abuse of authority, bail is denied." That got a few surprised murmurs from the back of the room. Ophelia finally reacted not with words, but with a visible twitch of her left eyebrow. If she was shocked, she didn't show it beyond that. As the hearing wrapped and they led her out, she finally turned to look at me. Just for a second, not hatred, not even anger. Just a quiet, simmering disbelief, as if she still couldn't fathom that someone like me had managed to undo everything she'd built. I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eye and gave her the same nod I'd give a neighbor borrowing a rake. That was the last time I ever saw her. Afterward, the temporary HOA oversight committee, the one I was now a part of, met in the community center's back room. Dana had brought a small whiteboard, which she was already filling with bullet points under the header restoration plan. Ellis was leafing through old financial records, and a new addition to the group, a retired systems analyst named Priya, was scanning spreadsheets on her tablet. "We need a forensic audit," she said without looking up. "There are at least 4 separate accounts Ophelia had access to. 2 of them don't appear in any of the annual summaries." Dana nodded. "We already voted to bring in a third-party firm." "They'll start next week." Ellis tapped a sheet of paper with his knuckle. "Here's another gem. She was charging a processing fee on every fine she issued, and that fee went into a separate account, not the HOA's general fund." "That's criminal," I said. "Literally." Priya gave a dry chuckle. "Well, good thing she's in the right place then." But it wasn't just about finances anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, more stories came out. A single mother on Maple Row revealed that Ophelia had threatened to report her for code violations if she didn't stop letting her son skateboard in the driveway. A disabled veteran showed us a letter she received last year demanding her wheelchair ramp be removed because it clashed with the neighborhood aesthetic. A couple who had been planning to adopt shared how Ophelia denied their request to build a backyard playhouse, citing a rule that didn't exist. Each story added another crack in the illusion she'd built that she was protecting the neighborhood. In reality, she'd built a miniature empire on intimidation, lies, and the assumption that no one would ever fight back. And then there was the worst of it. One of the houses Ophelia had placed a lien on, the owners had been late on dues by 2 weeks, too. She issued a violation, then another, then added a compounding late fee that tripled in a month. They weren't wealthy. They tried to fight it. Eventually, they sold the house at a loss and moved in with family. We tracked them down with the help of the county clerk. They were willing to testify. Ada Vieger reached out again after that. She told me charges were being expanded. The racketeering count would now include predatory lien practices and fraudulent foreclosure threats. She used the HOA as a weapon, Vieger said, but the thing about weapons is they leave evidence. I asked her how strong the case was. She didn't hesitate. We're in plea deal territory. Her attorney knows it. He's trying to negotiate a deal to avoid prison time. Will she? Vieger paused. If it were up to me, no, but the judge will decide. With the amount of restitution involved, though, she's not walking away free. 3 days later, we received official notice from the county court. The HOA was placed under administrative receivership pending the outcome of the criminal case. Our temporary committee was granted formal authority to manage operations until elections could be held. We were also authorized to work with a legal team to begin restoring improperly issued fines and returning funds to affected homeowners. It was the first time in years the HOA had been held accountable by anyone other than itself. At the first open forum, we invited every homeowner to speak. No time limits, no pre-written agenda, just a microphone and a room full of people who finally had permission to be honest. A man in his 70s stood up first. "I've lived here since this neighborhood was built," he said, "and for the first time in 20 years, I feel like someone's listening." A young woman next. "She fined me for putting up a banner for my dad's return from deployment. Said it was unapproved signage. I cried for an hour. I'm not crying now." One by one, they came forward, some angry, some tearful. All relieved. By the end, we had a list of over 60 homeowners requesting refunds or policy changes. We promised every request would be reviewed, and this time we meant it. 2 weeks later, the forensic audit results came in. Over $120,000 had been misappropriated or funneled into off-book accounts, with nearly 30 homeowners directly impacted by illegal fines or manipulated violations. The firm's report concluded with a recommendation that the HOA be fully rechartered under new leadership and strict oversight. The county approved it. We scheduled elections. 5 board seats, public vote, 1 ballot per home. I didn't run. I'd done what I came to do. Besides, I figured I'd had enough HOA politics to last a lifetime. On the day of the election, turnout was higher than it had ever been. The new board included Dana, Priya, and Rudd, along with 2 others who had never even attended a meeting before. That was the best part. People who had been silent were now speaking up, and they weren't going to let another tyrant take the reins. As for Ophelia, she took the plea deal. 2 years of house arrest, mandatory restitution payments, and permanent barring from any HOA leadership role in the state. She lost her home. Turns out, you can't pay your mortgage when your secret accounts are seized and your reputation is radioactive. Moxie and I still walk past her old house sometimes. It's empty now. For sale sign out front. No one's touched the flower beds in months. The azaleas she was always so proud of have withered into brittle stems. I let Moxie do her business right at the edge of the lawn just once. I didn't bag it. I figured she owed me that much.